Good afternoon and welcome to NTD News. Here's today's top stories. Dozens of tornadoes hit the southeast U.S., killing 18 people and damaging hundreds of homes. Some states now under a state of emergency. OPEC and oil-producing nations agreed to historic oil production cuts. The move puts an end to the price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia and aims to stabilize the industry. It's been difficult to get together this Easter, but people still found a way to celebrate their faith. And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is out of the hospital, while total UK deaths rise to more than 11,000. The CCP virus pandemic is not the only disaster disrupting lives in the US this week. Parts of the South are in shambles today after deadly tornadoes and severe storms.
By early Monday, at least 34 tornadoes in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Georgia, and at least 18 people dead. Several of those tornadoes tore through Mississippi and Louisiana Easter Sunday, overturning vehicles and damaging hundreds of structures.
We saw the tornado. We could tell it was going to be about a mile or so south of us, but you could hear it, and we knew that it was going to be bad.
Mississippi and Louisiana now in a state of emergency.
We have hundreds of lines down, and this is going to take a long time for us to recover from. We're not going to recover from this in 2 or 3 days, not even 2 or 3 weeks.
Officials in Monroe say at least 200 homes are damaged from the storms. Residents there advised to stay home to avoid injury and keep social distancing.
We want the stay-at-home order to continue because we don't want individuals walking and creating some challenges for themselves injury-wise. We don't want them driving over some of these power lines.
The storm system is heading up the East Coast, posing a threat all the way to Pennsylvania, with some areas seeing possible tornadoes, hail, and flash flooding.
And strict social distancing rules means it's been hard to be together physically this Easter, but people still found ways to celebrate.
It's been an Easter like no other. At Washington National Cathedral, the bishop holding an Easter service in an empty church.
Good morning and happy Easter. Christ has risen.
Restrictions from authorities across the U.S. asking people to avoid large gatherings means churches found alternative ways to celebrate the Christian calendar's holiest day. Masses like this one were watched online by thousands of people. The church's orchestra and choir performed digitally through a video conference call, still finding a way to sing together and celebrate their faith amid the pandemic. Similar scenes at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, streaming their service.
This Easter will be much different than others because in many cases we'll be separated physically only from our churches.
In his Easter message, Trump urged people to social distance, calling the virus the plague.
We won't be sitting there next to each other, which we'd like to be, and soon we'll be again. But right now we're keeping separation. We're getting rid of the plague. It's celebrate. Bring the family together like no other. We have a lot to be thankful for. Happy Easter, everybody.
A handful of churches decided to hold in-person services, predicting divine protection from the disease. During these trying times, others were physically apart but found a way to be together in spirit.
And for many, it was a time to give thanks for those lost. In the U.S. alone, the death toll from the virus surpassing 22,000. And in the Vatican, Pope Francis leading his Easter Mass in an empty St. Peter's Basilica, in an event scaled down by the CCP virus outbreak.
An empty St. Peter's Basilica on one of the holiest days in the Catholic calendar. Pope Francis led his Easter Mass with only a handful of assistants to help him. A far cry from the annual service, which usually attracts up to 100,000 people in St. Peter's Square. The Pope used his Urbi et Orbi message to call for global solidarity as people around the world are forced to stay indoors. He called for the relaxation of international sanctions, debt relief for poor nations, and ceasefires, and praised doctors, nurses, and those working to keep essential services running. All of the Pope's Holy Week activities this year were modified, with no public participation allowed, but the Easter Sunday Mass was available to live stream across the world.
And in other news, OPEC and other oil-producing nations agreed to record production cuts never seen before. This brings the oil production war to an end.
OPEC and oil-producing nations agreed on Sunday to cut oil output by a record amount as oil prices slumped amid the CCP virus pandemic. Measures to slow the spread of the CCP virus have destroyed demand for fuel. OPEC Plus sources said they expect the total global oil cuts to amount to more than 20 million barrels per day, Trump said. That's 20% of global supply. The cuts go into effect May 1st. Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. expressed satisfaction on the agreement. President Trump was optimistic that the deal would revive the industry. He said in a tweet, "The energy industry will be strong again, far faster than currently anticipated. Thank you to all of those who worked with me on getting this very big business back on track, in particular, Russia and Saudi Arabia." It's the biggest oil output cut ever. The cuts will remain active until April 2022, although they will gradually lessen after June.
And Dr. Anthony Fauci says there's hope for a gradual return to normal as early as next month. He cites the number of hospitalizations and intubations, which have begun to flatten and turn a corner.
Hopefully we'll see a very sharp decline, and then you could start thinking about how we can keep it that way and prevent it from resurging when you're starting to think about a gradual.
And two notices on a Chinese university website show the Chinese regime is censoring research on the origin of the CCP virus. All research papers must first be approved by central authorities. It's the latest attempt to control the narrative on where it all began.
Notices from two leading Chinese universities show the Chinese regime is censoring research around the origin of the virus. The notices have since been deleted but remain archived online. One references China's Ministry of Science and Technology, which says any research around the virus's origin must first be approved by the ministry. The other says research should be strictly managed and submitted for review by the university before publishing. Universities in China are all tightly controlled by the state. It's the latest development in China's attempt to control the narrative surrounding the origin of the virus. China's original explanation claimed the virus likely came from an infected bat at a Wuhan seafood market, but an early investigation of the market found no bats were sold there. China then tried to pin the blame on America, saying it brought the virus to Wuhan, but it has since backtracked, admitting it began in Wuhan. The possibility that the virus is man-made and leaked from a lab is also circulating. The Wuhan Institute of Virology is just 10 miles from the seafood market. It houses more infectious diseases than any lab in Asia, including coronaviruses. Employees at the lab have been ordered not to talk to anyone about the new virus. China appointed its top military biowarfare expert to take over the lab at the beginning of February.
And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is out of the hospital. He was discharged on Sunday after spending 1 week in a London hospital with the CCP virus. This included 3 days in intensive care. Our UK correspondent Jane Worrell has more.
For which I will be grateful for the rest of my life. I want to thank the many nurses, men and women whose care has been so astonishing.
His first message after leaving hospital was a very personal tribute, naming several staff and singling out 2 nurses, Jenny and Lewis.
I hope they won't mind if I mention in particular 2 nurses who stood by my bedside for 48 hours when things could have gone either way. For every second of the night, they were watching and they were thinking and they were caring and making the interventions I needed.
Johnson's move into hospital a week ago and then intensive care brought home the seriousness of this disease, showing how power and wealth does not make you immune to this virus. He's now at his official countryside residence, joined by his pregnant fiancée, who has not seen Johnson since he was admitted to hospital. His fiancée also sending thanks, saying there were times last week that were very dark indeed. He was struck down as the nation was entering a deadly phase, and the figures in the past week have been grim. On Sunday, a reminder that the nation is still amid the battle, the UK became the fourth country in Europe after Italy, Spain and France to sadly lose more than 10,000 of its people.
Today marks a sombre day in the impact of this disease.
A number hard to picture if each empty seat represented someone's life. It also represents those of their loved ones they left behind, whose lives have been changed forever. A review of the UK's measures are due later this week. Johnson is here, his attention turned on his own recovery, until his doctors say he is well enough to go back to Downing Street. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
UK deaths now stand over 11,000. UK foreign ministers saying they haven't yet reached their peak. And in other news, it's been reported WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange fathered 2 children with a lawyer who was representing him. He was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, fighting extradition at the time.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange fathered 2 children with a lawyer representing him while he was sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, according to a British newspaper on Sunday. The mother of his children, 37-year-old South African lawyer Stella Morris, told the Mail on Sunday the couple have 2 sons, aged 1 and 2, both conceived while Assange was in the embassy and kept secret from media and intelligence agencies monitoring his activity. The paper said Morris has been engaged to Assange since 2017. Both of their children are British citizens. Assange watched their births on a video link, the paper said. Australian-born Assange was dragged out of the embassy last year after a 7-year standoff and is now jailed in Britain fighting extradition to the US on computer hacking and espionage charges.
Up next, Russia returning Chinese citizens across the shared border. Residents panic as the situation is worsening there. That and more news from China after the break.
Our investigative reporters at the Epoch Times have spent 18 months uncovering the biggest political scandal in modern history. We connected the dots around Spygate, the actions by Obama-era officials against Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Join me on Declassified as we bring you up-to-date developments on this unfolding scandal.
Welcome back. Human-to-human transmission of the new CCP virus is clear now, but it wasn't in the early days. Taiwan says it alerted the WHO about it as early as December 31st, but the World Health Organization denies this. NTD's Catherine Wen reports.
On Saturday, Taiwan officials publicized a letter it had sent to the World Health Organization. Why? To prove that as early as December 31st last year, the country tried to sound the alarm, warning the organization about human-to-human transmission of the virus.
That at least 7 atypical pneumonia cases were reported in Wuhan, China.
The letter explained that Chinese health officials told the media it wasn't SARS, an infectious disease that killed hundreds in the early 2000s. It added that the patients were being treated in isolation.
And the cases have been isolated for treatment.
The organization said the email didn't mention human-to-human transmission, but Taiwan's health minister called the distinction playing word games. Taiwan's health minister says any medical professional would know isolation implies human-to-human transmission.
That's professionals acting like amateurs. If being treated in isolation is not a warning, then what is?
On Saturday, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesman defended the WHO, saying the organization released authoritative information at the earliest time possible based on China's confirmation of human-to-human transmission. The Chinese regime didn't confirm human-to-human transmission of the virus until January 20th, but reports show that authorities knew about it well before that date. Currently, Taiwan is barred from WHO membership due to pressure from the Chinese Communist regime. But the Trump administration recently criticized the agency, saying it missed the call on the pandemic and chose politics over public health. President Trump has now threatened to withhold funding from the organization.
Taiwan has so far been successful in controlling the virus. It currently has less than 400 confirmed deaths and 400 confirmed cases and less than 6 deaths as of Saturday. And inside Heilongjiang province, China, there's another situation developing at the Russian border. Our reporter Sherwin Rong has the details.
Russia is sending Chinese citizens back to China, among them likely people carrying the virus. While some return voluntarily, others are forced by the Russian government. Many Chinese citizens believe the regime has the situation under control. Until April 9th, the border city Suifenhe reported a total of 151 imported confirmed cases from Russia. On April 7th, both China and Russia closed their shared border. Official reports say since March 21st, more than 2,000 people have crossed the border from Russia into Heilongjiang province. A resident told us on April 8th that at present there are still Chinese citizens stranded at the border. He added that people who have crossed the border into China will be quarantined and that even if they are not infected, they're more likely to get the virus in an environment like that.
The city of Suifenhe is too small and doesn't have many places where you can go into isolation. Some people stay in the stadium, and there are others at major hotels. Maybe you don't carry the virus yourself, but you don't know who among those coming back with you are infected. After you've been in a densely populated space, it's easy to get infected.
A video circulating online shows one such stadium with people lying on the floor. As the epidemic continues to worsen, many residents are panicking.
Restricted access. Only one person can be sent out per family to shop every 3 days to buy something. Anyone who goes to work should carry a certificate from the community and their company to let them enter and exit. Now the communities are basically closed, and people do not go out. Of course, there is some panic.
Chinese state-run media says the border city has been building a makeshift hospital since April 6th, and it is expected to be in operation by April 11th, providing more than 600 beds. Reporting by Sherwin Rong, NTD News.
Up next, face masks, face shields, and hand sanitizers are running low. But more businesses are shifting production to fill the demand. That and more what people are doing to help after the break.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
In China, something can be illegal, but still in common practice. For example, bribery, or intellectual property theft, or Uber.
Well, at the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people and counting. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? It's starring me.
It's more and more obvious that China is having a major influence on the U.S.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? 中国揭秘.
In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the only show on TV or the internet. It will be the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Have you heard of China Uncensored?
Yeah, I have.
You actually have? He's heard of China Uncensored.
I love China Uncensored.
Welcome back. In the fight against the CCP virus, small and medium-sized businesses are also jumping in to help. Many are now working to fill the demand for personal protective gear.
As patients inundate hospitals and doctors' offices across the nation, medical staff say they're in dire need of more personal protective equipment. Things like face masks, face shields, and hand sanitizer have become precious commodities. The pandemic has overwhelmed even major manufacturers, so smaller and medium-sized businesses have also started producing them.
So we've basically suspended all of our other manufacturing into making these masks.
Houston startup 3D Standard specializes in making custom parts for machines in factories. It has now programmed its 3D printers to make reusable masks that have replaceable N95 filters.
We could do something, and we could use our very talented workforce and the people that we have that are already used to production. They're already used to using the machines that we have in play on boat manufacturing, and brought that into the, I guess, the face shield and mask assembly wheelhouse.
The company is better known for crafting sleek luxury boats people buy for their lake cabins, but now they're producing up to 5,000 face shields a day.
Hospitals started calling us, ERs, police, EMT, firefighters, first responders.
This Nashville, Tennessee craft distillery is replicating a model many in the spirits business have adopted at this time of crisis, making hand sanitizer. The company is overwhelmed by demand, like others making protective products in the fight against the CCP virus.
And in what's sure to excite kids and some adults around the country, you can now bake the famous DoubleTree chocolate chip cookies at home. Since their hotels are closed, the Hilton chain wanted to offer Americans a little comfort while they shelter in place. DoubleTree cookies have quite the long history and passionate fan following. More than 30 million of them are consumed every year. The cookie even became the first food to be baked in orbit. That was aboard the International Space Station. Copycat recipes have been shared online for years, but in the spirit of hospitality, Hilton has released the official version. You can find the recipe on DoubleTree's website or their social media channels. And in New York, a day in the life of one of its charity workers, one of the many heroes fighting to save a city under siege.
Carla Brown's day started in a typical New York City fashion, with a commute on a crowded subway car. But lately, those crowds have come with added anxiety. Brown is the executive director of a nonprofit with a contract for the city's Meals on Wheels, here supervising employees as they load up food bound for elderly residents.
Many seniors who have not been on our program have been dependent on other people to come and feed them, but those people can't come out anymore. So it's a really big issue for us to make sure that people are fed and also safe.
Food deliveries have changed in the weeks. Normally accustomed to interacting with the food recipients, many now ask for the meals to be left at the door with no interaction. On one visit, a client's home health aide asked for the meal to be placed on a window sill at the far end of the hall. But despite the stress that the virus has brought the community, Brown says she's optimistic the city will bounce back.
We've been through so many things before, Hurricane Sandy, 9/11, and we're still standing, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
And up next, how will the CCP virus affect newborn babies? Find out what doctors recommend and the choices moms and dads can make after the break.
Are you tired of newspapers spinning the truth and pushing false narratives? And are you looking for honest coverage of Spygate, the true story of collusion? Or the truth behind the crisis at our southern border? Or how the Chinese Communist Party is working to subvert America and our way of life? Then you need to check out the Epoch Times newspaper. It's independent, nonpartisan, and it doesn't push any political agendas. Just go to readepoch.com and try it yourself for a full month for just $1. You'll absolutely love it.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. the Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Welcome back. It's a terrifying thought for a new mom, that she could possibly infect her baby with the new virus. How should mothers weigh their choices if they test positive? NTD's Melina Weiskup talked to one clinician who explains why feeding infants naturally is more important than ever.
Expecting mothers who've tested positive for the virus or suspect they may have been exposed may wonder about the best way to keep their baby safe. Mothers can take heart in knowing that breastfeeding is still possible.
There's no evidence that the COVID-19, the virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19 is transmitted through breast milk.
That's according to some studies. And it is widely known that breastfeeding protects newborns from getting severely sick.
So we know that breastfed babies, when they're ill, they're much less likely to be hospitalized for the severity of illness that babies who are artificially fed would be at risk for.
The Centers for Disease Control's most recent guidelines show only a small number of newborns have been infected. It isn't known if they were infected before or after birth, but the CDC says virus transmission during pregnancy is highly unlikely. As for whether or not to keep the baby in the same room or isolate them after birth, they say it's each family's choice. But Eyeglass and other physician members of the Academy of Breastfeeding noticed where there's a risk of infection, hospitals often separate mother from child without giving families much of a choice. She wants to make sure they know they still have a choice when it comes to separation and breastfeeding. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And in sports news, Tour de France organizers are focusing on a postponement of this year's race rather than a cancellation due to the pandemic.
The Tour's main publisher said in a confidential email it was freezing the administrative aspects of the collaboration. The sport's most prestigious race is still currently scheduled to run June 27th to July 19th, and Tour de France organizers declined to comment. The Tokyo Olympics, soccer's European Championship, Wimbledon and French Open tennis, and golf's British Open, just some of the major sporting events postponed or canceled this year. It would be a major challenge to postpone cycling's greatest stage race. Riders, sponsors, organizers, media, and nearly 4,500 people are directly involved in the three-week event. The International Cycling Union said last month the France, Italy, and Spain Grand Tours, as well as other major one-day races, would have priority on a revised schedule once racing resumes.
And this year, the Wounded Warrior Project introduced veterans to dolphins in Florida. They connected via video conference to stay safe while social distancing, but still stay connected.
Laura O'Neill is an animal care specialist at Dolphin Research Center. She led the video conference from the Florida Keys.
Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we're not able to provide that right now, but we are really excited to be able to bring the dolphins to them and the families that are self-isolating or quarantining at home.
Veterans were able to ask questions and watch the dolphins perform in real time.
So I've been to the DRC a couple times, and one of the things that I've noticed is how smart the dolphins are and how they're able to notice if a warrior or a person is dealing with anxiety or if they have a physical disability.
The event was part of the Wounded Warrior Project's peer support group activities for veterans. The organization aims to raise awareness and support for the needs of severely injured members of the military.
And that's the latest updates for now. Thanks for tuning in. You can catch up again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time.